Obuaku is a small town in the heart of Oboro region. In the olden days, Obuaku suffered severe humiliations from their neighbor communities because Obuaku community is landlocked. They don't have river, so they share Iyi River with their neighbor town Abo. In the east, they share boundary with Aba town, north Oku town, south Aba town, and the Ifite in the west. In one way or the other, they benefit from these towns. But what made Obak stand out as a town was their creativity and the intelligence. They value and respect wise people amongst them. They train young men and women that portray wisdom and creativity at a young age. This set of people are good assets to the society. Obak people has the most intelligent court in the whole Oboro region. Therefore, they were called center of excellency. People from different towns in Oboro region visit Obak court to settle disputes. This tradition was handed down from generation to generation. Onya was one time the king of Obak community. He had two sons, UMELO and Onoka. Onya followed the path of his forefathers. He surrounded himself with wise men and women of Obak community to ensure a healthy leadership. Whenever a dispute is brought to the palace, he would invite these wise men. Whatever suggestion they give him, that will be his decision. However, the people of Obak pays homage to the Oku community because Oku community give them a large portion of land for agricultural purposes. This homage has been existing from the existence of Obak and the Oku as a community. UMELO, King Onya's first son, grew up in a very bitter way. Despite his father's effort to inculcate the custom of their people in him, he deviated because he has a contrary ideology. UMELO's years of being in the palace and watching his father pass judgment and make decisions were futile because instead of learning from his father the order of things, he was embittered. He assumed that Obak people were slaves to their neighbor communities. One day, he questioned his father Onya why Obak people pay homage to Oku community. The king smiled and told him that it is a big favor that Oku people gave them land to cultivate on. Melo argued that land belongs to no one and no one should pay for land. His father shunned him. He told him that as humans, we are obliged to follow some rules and regulations in order to maintain orderliness. This statement provoked UMELO and he walked out on his father. He kept contemplating why humans are obliged to follow rules and regulations. In his opinion, humans should be given the freedom to do whatever they want. However, outside the palace, UMELO was known to be a wayward, nonchalant and callous fellow. He does everything he wanted. He sleeps with different women. No one has ever reported him because he was ready to kill. He has his gang of bad boys that walk around with him. He picks things he wanted from sellers without paying. His personal guard warned him severally, but he wouldn't listen. One day, UMELO's personal guard reported his callousness to the king. UMELO was sanctioned. He was flogged and his movement outside the palace was restricted. He was mandated to be inside the palace for 6 months. Within these 6 months, UMELO was obliged to always be by the side of his father. One day, a man was brought to this palace. The man stabbed his brother because his brother ate his food. In UMELO's perspective, the man that stabbed his brother was right. That was the right thing to do. UMELO was surprised to hear his father sentence the man to death by execution. Out of curiosity, UMELO questioned his father in the presence of the cabinets, wise men, and the elders of the community. This act is unheard of, so UMELO was arrested immediately. He was taken to the dungeon. He stayed there for 2 days. On the third day, he was freed. King Onya went to UMELO's chamber to speak with him. He talked to UMELO heart to heart as a father, not as a king. None of his father's advice made sense to UMELO because he has made up his mind to leave the palace. The next day, as early as 5 a.m., UMELO packed his clothes and left. His personal guard attempted to stop him, but UMELO stabbed him in the neck and left. Nobody knew why UMELO left or where he went. Many people were sent to search for him, but UMELO was nowhere to be found. Traditionally, UMELO, being the first son of his father, is entitled to be the next king after his father's death. UMELO's wayward life began to trouble his father, Onya, because he knew that the people of Obaku will not be safe in the hands of UMELO. Meanwhile, Unoka, UMELO's younger brother, grew up to be a very wise man. He was taken to Umuobo at the age of 10 for adequate training. Unoka did not spend most of his life in the palace because he had become a community asset. He was trained alongside other kids by the wise men. King Onya knew that relinquishing the kingship to Unoka would breed war between UMELO and Unoka in the near future. All his efforts to bring UMELO back to the palace was futile. In Abo, there was this terrorist group that resides in the forest. These young men commit a lot of atrocities. They rape young women, forcefully take people's harvest, steal people's domestic animals, and lots of others. They were known as Ojiabani because they normally move in the night. They don't have permanent residence to avoid being invaded. This group kept expanding as many callous young men joined them. Most of them were banished from their respective villages. UMELO was in Abo when he heard of this group. He developed interest to join them instantly. When he was initiated into the group, he was so excited as no one troubles anybody. These people behave like animals because no one cares about morality. They behave, talk, laugh, and act as they wish. They bully and inflict pains on others without remorse. Everything about their attitude was for fun. UMELO told Aja, the leader of that group, that he was the crown prince, that once his father dies, he would become the king. Then he would legalize their group. They all were excited and looking forward to the day King Onya would die. After some years, King Onya was still hoping that UMELO would repent and return to take his responsibilities. One day, some ladies of Obaku community were invaded in Iyi River by these young men. All of them were raped. One of the ladies recognized UMELO. Immediately they got home, she reported to King Onya that UMELO was amongst the young men that raped them. This act brought about controversy in Obaku community. There was protest in the king's palace. The king was forced to do justice to the abominable act. King Onya sent word to the king of the 4 communities that surrounded Obaku community. Many young men from these communities went into the forest in search of UMELO and his gang. Few of the terrorists were caught, while others escaped, including UMELO. Those that they caught were beheaded immediately. King Onya assembled his cabinet. chief priests, the wise men, and some elders of the community. That day, he denounced UMELO as his son and the crown prince. He announced Unoka as his only son and the heir to the throne. Everybody in Obak was happy because Unoka was the man of the people. He spent most of his life in the streets of Obako community. He associated well with the people. He never depended on his father's wealth. He was a farmer and a good businessman. He was also a scholar and surrounded himself with wise men. He studied every tradition, custom, and culture of Obako community. When Unoka was announced as the crown prince, he knew it was time to learn from his father. He moved into the palace. Unoka followed his father's step. He became the eye and the ear of his father since he knows every corner of the community. Unoka's presence in the palace energized his father because he worked hand in hand with his father. Words got into UMELO's ear that Unoka has become the crown prince. UMELO became restless. He couldn't believe that in this life someone else would take his place as the firstborn. He said that his father has robbed him of his birthright. He vowed to fight for what is his. He brought the issue to his gangs, and they promised him that they would help him reclaim his birthright. One night, King Onya's palace was invaded by Ojaban hoodlums. King Onya was dragged out after they have killed every guard in the palace. UMELO emerged from the darkness and stabbed his father. Luckily, Unoka was not in Obako because his father sent him on an errand to Oku community. The next day, UMELO occupied the king's seat and crowned himself as the king of Obako community. He summoned the cabinet and the wise men. All the wise men stood against him. He gave them two options: to pledge their loyalty or to die by poisoning. They all chose to die by poisoning. UMELO poisoned all the wise men. Some of the cabinets pledged their loyalty to save their lives. UMELO made his gangs his guards and cabinets. The day UMELO became the king of Obako, abomination and atrocities were born. People were mandated to pay homage to the king monthly. People behaved like animals. He told his people that humans are not meant to be caged under any law. Let there be freedom. His gangs bully, rape, beat anybody that crosses their path. People steal people's crops, sleep with people's wives. Obak become a survival of the fittest. One day, UMELO woke up to see Aja, the leader of the terrorist group, on his throne. He was surprised when Aja told him that he needed to test how it feels to be a king. UMELO attempted to force him out of the throne, but UMELO was beaten blue and black. Aja became the king of Obako community. Most times, they front UMELO, but within the palace, Aja occupies the king's seat and the king's position. UMELO commanded Obak people to stop paying homage to Oko community because land belongs to no one. The next farming season, Oko people seized the land and chased Obak people from their farmland. Many people were devastated because they knew that without Oko's farmland, Obak people would suffer famine. Meanwhile, Unoka, having heard the atrocities UMELO was committing in Obak, decided to devise means of dethroning UMELO and his gangs. Unoka reached out to the king of Oko community, the king of Abo, the king of Aba, and the king of Ifite community. These communities surrounded Obak. Young men from these communities were selected to fight those hoodlums in Obako palace. UMELO has become a slave in his palace. During the day, he will be dressed as the king to address some matters according to Aja's instruction. During the night, he serves Aja and his men. Aja even slept with UMELO's wife. He was used as an object for mockery. UMELO began to understand why his father told him that there should be rules and regulations to checkmate human actions. UMELO thought that freedom comes when people are allowed to do whatever they want. Many people from Obako community began to relocate to their neighbor towns for safety. There was a great famine in Obako because there was no land to farm on. Many young people resorted to stealing for livelihood. They go to their neighbors' villages to steal. Obako people kept reducing by the day. At a time, UMELO and his gangs realized that there was only few people to rule. Hunger then found its way to the palace as people no longer pay homage. Despite being the king, UMELO and some of his gangs were often sent out by Aja in search of food. One night, Unoka invaded the palace with the young men he formed from different neighbor communities. Aja and his men were all caught, including UMELO. These young men were dragged to the village square. Before UMELO was killed, he asked his brother and his people for forgiveness. He confessed that he regretted his actions. After the death of UMELO, Oloka performed a befitting burial rite for late King Onya. Oloka was crowned as the king of Obako. Began to rebuild the relationship they had with their neighbor communities. UMELO and his gangs has done so many damages, but Onoka promised his people that he would make up for everything his brother has done. Most times, we think that humans are limited by some of the rules and regulations we are obliged to obey. But the truth is that no matter how painful as it may be, they were created for the good of all. UMELO thought that rules are hard on humans. Then he ruled without rules and found out that without law, nothing works. There will be no loyalty, no trust, no peace, no security, and no unity. We can never be wiser than the words of the wise ones. If you think education is very expensive, try ignorance.